beyeshiva.net.
Chav Zayin, on the bottom, Seif Ches, chapter 8. Okay, today's class is dedicated La'elu Nishmas, L'Zikaron, Harav Ariel, Ben Harav Shaltiel, Ze'ev Ravnoi, Zechrena Levracha, whose yahrzeit was on the 8th day of Shvat. He was actually a student of mine, Rabbi Ariel Ravnoi. Passed away a number of years ago, a very special young man. Dedicated by his father and family, and also dedicated by Reb Shimshon and Rivki Vershansky Leilu Nishmas, her father and his father-in-law, Reb Zalman Yudah, Ben Reb Shalom Yeshaya Deitch, Olav Shalom, Tehei Nishmasim Tzuda B'Tzur HaChayim. Okay, so let's remember the summation of what we learned, at least one of the main points, and that is that what is the practical ramifications of that fundamental idea that the Zohar articulates in the words Orein Sof, Lamata Adein Tachlis, that Orein Sof extends even to the lowest places. What does that mean? Viscerally, practically, in a person's life. What it means is it gives the long example of Yosef HaTzadik, the story with the Baal Shem Tov. But the point in the summation is, at least one of the points is, that a person, when they're completely anchored in their own divine, pristine core, a person ought to never allow themselves, despite how difficult it can be, to get pulled away from that space, to get detached from that space, and follow every thought down a rabbit hole. And then sooner or later, I'm completely consumed by that thought or emotion or experience or encounter. But rather, the power of Yosef was that he was always anchored and entrenched, like every person can be, every person according to their capacity. If I could completely be anchored and entrenched in my divine, pure, sacred, whole self, then I'm not afraid of any thought that comes up, because I allow it, I don't repress it, I don't even fight it, I don't start getting defined by it. Rather, I realize that this is part of the divine self that wants to work through a human experience. You understand? And that changes everything. Now, it's not easy, because when the thought comes, the thought wasn't at the shear. The thought says, I'm the reality. This is the only reality. Whatever the thought is, the anger, the nervousness, the fear, the anxiety, the need to explode, to implode, whatever the thought, the jealousy, the hatred, the negativity, the despair, the depression, the loss of control. I could say more, but everybody gets the point.
It's hard to believe that Hashem wants that. It's hard to believe that Hashem wants that.
But it's true. It's true. That's part of my mission. I don't have to be afraid of it. Like I said yesterday, where the Zohar says, Hashem tells Moshe, Boyel Pare, come to Pare. So the Zohar says it should have said Lechel Pare. You don't tell somebody, come. If I want to send you to Los Angeles for a mission, or I send a taxi to a driver to Manhattan to pick something up, I don't say come to Manhattan. I say please go to Manhattan. Lechel Pare. In Parshas Ve'ed, Hashem says Lechel Pare, go to Pare. Lech, like lech lecha, go. Telech. Telech mipa, telech shama. That's how you say it in Hebrew. So the Zohar says that at this point, Moshe Rabbeinu himself got petrified. It says Dachel Moshe. Moshe was overwhelmed. It was the first time he had to go into Paro's private chamber. All the other times he met Paro on the outside. Now he was confronting Paro, the head of the snake. Tanin Hagadol, so he says Tanin Hagadol, the great serpent, the great alligator, crocodile, facing him head on in his own terms. Not just physically, but also emotionally. So even Moshe Kavayachal was scared. And Hashem couldn't say go, he said, boy, come. Come with me. I'm here. In other words, and not only I'm sending you to go on a shlichus, but that's pshat shlucha shaladam kemaisa. That in Yiddishkeit, a shlichus is the pshat, I'm here. The Alter Rebbe writes in the Torah Vayikra, Shlucha shel Adam ha'elyon k'maisa. Adam is Adam ha'elyon. So every person is a shluch shel Adam ha'elyon k'maisa. What does it mean k'maisa? K'maisa is I'm here. You're representing me. What does it mean you're representing me? It means you're a channel for my truth, for my energy. Boyal pare. Don't go, come. And that changes everything. So it's two things. First of all, it's not to be defined by the thought. You're not defined by the thought. What are you defined by? You're defined by something that's not defined. You're defined by Ein Sof, by Ein Sof. And I'm completely in that, and I remain in that space. I will refuse to detach, because the moment I detach from that, now I'm a victim of any thought, emotion, experience that comes my way. You write to me one thing, you trigger me one way. You write to me a nice thing, you trigger me this one. But I'm completely like a vulnerable scared reality just floating in space waiting for somebody to validate it. Rather, when you're anchored in the Ein Sof, you're anchored in your divine self, a derivative of divine infinite consciousness. So now I can allow a lot of things to come, knowing that these are things I got to work through. These are things I have to deal with. It's also part of me. It's part of the human experience. I'm not just pure divine infinity. Like we say, there's a nefesh elikis and there's a nefesh Bahamas. And the relationship is essential to a person's mission in life. The Chiddush by Yosef was, therefore, his brothers couldn't understand how he can be running an entire superpower and not running it from a detached place, with hundreds of executives, and he could just sit in his office and learn Likkutei Torah all day or learn Yerushalmi all day, but rather, hu hashalit, hu hamashbir bar, the whole country was under his rulership, and he had to be b'hislapshus, meaning he had to think about it, he had to run it. So his machshavas l'chayra were all over the place, and yet, as he explained, because his neshama came from Olam HaAtzilis, he told his brothers, Hatachas Elikim ani. I don't come from a place that's under Elikim, under Shem Elikim. I come from a place that's kivayachal, beyond Elikim. So therefore, I see through Elikim. For me, Elikim is not a concealment, it's not a blockage. It's a mission, it's an opportunity to be able to bring back every thought to its source. Like the Alter Rebbe explains why you don't say Hashem has machshavas zaros. Even though he's thinking about everything, he knows everybody's thoughts. He has the most machshavas zaros in history. Talk about machshavas zaros. The Rebbeinu Shalom has the most machshavas zaros. So this, the Alter Rebbe explains, it's the concept of yodeya and yodua. Golui vi yodua. It's known. There's the knower and it's known. It's a whole different experience. Known doesn't mean you're detached. You don't know. You know everything. Maybe you know even better than if you known. You know more than knower. But it means I'm not defined by it. Golui, it's known. But it's not like with Google or artificial intelligence, right? You put in a word, boom, everything is known. But over there, you don't call it there's no emotional connection. Yosef was emotionally present. He wasn't a computer. If Yosef was a computer, fine, big deal. Computers do the same thing. They can deal with enormous amounts of data and they don't get into a bad mood. You can put whatever you want there, but you can write search for the worst things. They're fine. They don't care. But it gives us a mashal for the maila, not the chisaron. The chisaron is detached. It's not alive. But the maila is the golui v'yadua. All the data could be present, but it's not a machshava zara. Why is it not a machshava zara? Because by Yosef, it was all part of his dveikus in Hashem. And in every person's life, what does that mean practically? Not everybody is Yosef, not everybody is the Baal Shem Tov that Friday night when he had Aliyas on Neshama. As he says, what was the Baal Shem Tov's request? That even when his Neshama went up to heaven, he should be able to answer people's questions. It's interesting also what a Jew asks for. Most people, give me spiritual experiences. Baal Shem Tov asked that even when he has Aliyas on Neshama, he should still be able to answer people. And to answer people, you have to relate to their quandaries. You have to relate to their world. You have to go into their universe. I can't answer if I'm sitting in an ivory tower and I don't understand your experiences. So Friday night, Shabbos, 1/3 was here. 2/3 2/3 were there, and you understand that if 2/3 are there, so then even the third that's here, it's not so here. But yet, in a way, he was more here than others, because he was here with the Ein Sof. Like Ein Sof Lamata Den Tachlis. In fact, he was here with his infinity, so he was more here. In that sense, he could listen to a person more than somebody else listens to another person. I'm listening to another person because I'm part of the problem, so to speak. He could truly be present because he was also anchored in a place of infinity. Sometimes empathetic people think that if you're having a problem and if I don't become a mess together with you, it means I'm detached. So if I really feel your problem, let me become a mess together with you, so then you'll be a mess. Now I'm a mess, and that's pshat v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. But the truth is, it's the other way around. You don't need me to be a mess. Empathetic doesn't mean I have to become defined by the problem. On the contrary, then it's two people with problems instead of one person. Real empathy means I can tune into your world, be'emes, with authenticity, but I show up with my full love, with my full attachment, with my full presence. A lifeguard, in order to save somebody in the ocean, doesn't have to drown with them. That's not how you save somebody, to get pulled away in the undercurrent. No, your job is to go into the place of danger and then become a stable anchor to be able to lift up the other person. They say a story, the fourth Lubavitcher Rebbe was the Rebbe Maharash, Reb Shmuel, son of the Tzemach Tzedek, the youngest son. They say a ma'aseh about him that there were people that would come on Yechidus, which means they would come for private audiences. It's called Yechidus. So he would sweat terribly. His clothes were drenched, as though he went into a pool with his clothes. And every while, he would take off his clothes. He had whatever, chalat, whatever he had, and he asked the person who was the gabbai or the secretary there to bring him a new set of clothes. So once, the gabbai was carrying the clothes, and he says, what do you do with these clothes? Well, you're talking to people. Why are they so wet? You're climbing mountains. What happened? So the Rebbe Marash explained to him, he said as follows. He said, somebody comes in with a problem. I can't stay in my own clothes. I have to take off my clothes and put on their clothes. Because if I'm wearing my clothes, I can't really understand what's happening. Because I'm not having the issue, they're having the issue. So I put on their clothes. Now they finished, now I have to answer. If I'm wearing their clothes, I don't have an answer. Because that's why they came to me. So now I have to put on my clothes in order to be able to answer them. Now they have a second question. So I have to again take off my clothes and put on their clothes. So he says, try changing your clothes hundreds and hundreds of times. You'll see, it'll also get wet. Now, and if this is true with physical clothes, how much more so is it true with emotional clothes? So it's not partial what the Baal Shem Tov asked for, that he should be able to answer a shaila. So in every person's life, I can allow, maybe it's a little bit on a lower level, but the concept is similar. When you're rooted in your Ein Sof, you can go anywhere, meaning I can watch all these thoughts happen and they want to pull me in. I want to scream, I want to run away, I want to shut down, I don't want to have a relationship with you anymore. You related to what I'm saying? You know all these types of thoughts that come in, yeah? You can watch them, you can allow them to be, you can even breathe through them, but you never go down that rabbit hole. You never get pulled down by it. Why? Because you don't detach from the truth. And the truth is that right now in this space, even though your thoughts don't agree, right now in this space, the truth is that you are anchored in a place of infinite love and oneness, and therefore confidence and curiosity and compassion and creativity and wholeness and kedusha, holiness, wholeness and holiness. It's really the same thing. And you're in a place where you're open, you're not trapped, you don't need anybody's validation, you're truly, truly loved for who you are. Now, my thought doesn't agree with any of this. It's not true. That's why it's so angry, that's why it's so jealous. Okay, this is a machshava. I'm going to allow it to be, but I'm not going to identify with it that it becomes me. I'm not the fear, and I'm not the hatred, and I'm not the anger, and I'm not the competitiveness. and I'm not the insecurity, and I'm not the frustration, resentment, depression, and what have you. That's step one. And then there's even step two. I cannot identify with it and keep it at a distance. And then there's what Yosef did, which was even deeper, that even as he dealt with that machshava, right? And he looked at it and he observed it. Remember, this wasn't just negative machshavas that this was running a whole country. But essentially, it was as part of Ein Sof. It was an extension of Ein Sof. And that's the idea of Golei V'Yadu. That was at least one of the main nekudas that we learned. Now let's see weiter. Sifches. Mamshich ba Mamer. Mamshich ba Mamer. He continues in the Mamer, again in the Basi LGani. Shatam lekach sha'or hamechaya. Ein bo shum shinui v'ispailus klal. The reason that the oir hamechaya, the oir that gives life, doesn't go through a change, and even a hispilus. Hispilus means it doesn't get transformed, because essentially it doesn't mix. That's the lashon of Basi LGani. It doesn't get mixed. It always remains pristine, like it says about oil. Right? Yirmiyahu Hanavi calls the Jewish people zayis, an olive, Jews that come from an olive branch, from an olive tree, which means shemen mishchas kodesh. So Medrash says because oil is unique, that you could put it into every liquid and mix it, but it doesn't get dissolved. It always remains distinct, and it's tough l'mayla, it flows on top. It's an interesting shaila in halacha, the Maseches Shabbos, in the beginning of Masechta Shabbos. There's a question of when oil, let's say, is floating. If you put, let's say, you have a bottle, and you have water, and on top of it you have oil. The oil will rise to the top. That's why by salad dressings that have oil, it says, shake well before using. Why? What do they care if I don't shake well? The answer is because they're full of oil, so the oil is on the top. So if you just pour it, it's just going to have oil. You want it to be mixed in with all the other good things, like sugar and mayonnaise. So b'meila, you have to shake well. And if you shake well and then you leave it for a few minutes, again, the oil is going to be on top. That's the Seder. So the Gemara asks a question. It's a very interesting question. It's about Shabbos. When you carry something, you need to make a hakira and a hanacha. You have to uproot it, let's say, from Rishus HaYachid, and put it down in Rishus HaRabim. Then it's a chiyuv of Shabbos, hakira and a hanacha. You have to take it from where it was and put it down in its new destination. In order to take it from where it was, it has to be munach. It has to be settled in the Rishus. So now I uproot it from there. You can't uproot something if it wasn't there. So the question is, right, if something is moving around, like a ball is flying, right? So it's not an akira, it wasn't settled there. It has to be there, it has to be munach, either in a person's hand or a natural place, dal. So the question is, what if you have oil, and the oil is floating on top of the water? Is that called munach or not? Right? Is it called an akira? So it's a huge machlokes of Yochanan ben Nuri and the Rabbanan. And it's another question about tumah. If somebody touches the oil at full yom, does the wine under it also get tummy? Is it called mechuber or not mechuber? On one hand, the shemen is part of it, but on the other hand, it's always on top. So it's a question, halacha, between Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri and the Chacham, if it's called mechuber or it's not mechuber. Why is this? Why is there even a machlokes? The machlokes is because some things, even when they're there and they're present and they're lying, they're munach, but it retains its unique distinction. It's eina misadav. So he says about the oir, that the oir is eina misadav. To understand this more, the hine, richu kerech v'shayches ben oir in sof lamata mata, einoi tam masvik shlo yispal v'lo yishtana. V'na'il adover me'islabshus anashama beguf. Shlomrois, richu kerech shebeneim liyasam hafchim, v'skashrusim ein ele b'koich hamafli lasses k'mesha kasav aramma. B'shulchan Aruch, simen vav, harei la'acharei slabshus mispeles anashama mimikri haguf. You can't just say the reason doesn't get mixed and it doesn't get affected, it doesn't get defined, as explained at length before. The difference between Oir Ein Sof and, for example, the soul and the body, even the nefesh habahamis in the body, where the body affects the soul affects the body. We explained that length, like in a marriage. I come into your life and you affect me and I affect you. That's how we become so close. So he says, you can't just say, because the Oir Ein Sof is completely shaloi be'erech, it's completely infinite, so therefore, the mata, the lower, doesn't affect it. That's not enough because the soul is also completely from a different league than the body. And completely opposite. The Ramah says when we say in Ashayatzar, Roifich al basar umafli lasos. Mafli lasos. He says it's a pella. It's a wonder of wonders, the relationship between the soul and the body. Between the consciousness of the guf, the vitality of the guf and the guf. The Ramah says this is Roifich al basar umafli lasos. It's koyach hamafli lasos. It's a pella shebeployim that the two worlds come together. And they come together so well that they're indivisible. We don't even know this is the soul, this is the body. It's all one entity so deeply that you can even live your whole life and deny that you have a soul. Body is just a machine, like some people want to say. Happens to have electrical currents, and death just means the machine, is broken. Nonetheless, even though the soul is completely what's called in the language of Chassidus, shaloi be'erech, completely not be'erech, not in that league, not in that realm. Nonetheless, when it's a moment of islapshus, it gets dressed up. Get dressed up means it gets embodied. Embodied. Here it's not dressed up in clothes. It becomes part of it. It becomes embodied in the soul, in the body. Now they affect each other. As I gave an example, when you have a relationship of two people, like in a marriage, one says to the other, whatever you do, you're not going to affect me. That's not a very good sign. Of course you're going to affect me. I'm going to affect you and you're going to affect me. That is the vulnerability of a close relationship. And the neshama and the guf, that's what happens. The state of the body affects the soul, and of course, the whole soul affects the body. And that's why they have such a powerful relationship. It's called hislapshus. Hislapshus means, I'm not like the light of the sun. You like me, take me. You don't like me, shut your Venetian blinds. I don't take it personal. Here, there's a very intimate and intricate and personal relationship. So even though the neshama is completely from a place of infinity, it's shaloi be'erech, but when it comes in, it comes in. Can't work both ways. You want to not be affected, stay out. Stay above. But hislapshus by definition means you're here on my terms. You're coming in. You're working with my eye and with my ear and with every cell and with every bone and every sinew and every dimension of the guf, every neuron, every nekuda of the guf. Is the neshama is hislapshus there. That's how it lives. So it gets affected. And here you say, and let me explain what's v'ata mechayes kulam. Mikarner de'ebim at kinei beitzim. Till the eggs of the lice, and everything he explained. Vatzia sha'oil, he neka in the sha'oil. And I explained at length that even with Kalim Datzilis, everything we spoke in the earlier classes, and still you say it remains ein soif, ein mishtana, ein mispal. It's not changed, it's not mixed. Yeah.
It's the same in the physical, because Oram Chayesh or Ein Shem Shinoi, it's like a frequency of light. The frequency doesn't change, and the energy of the photon is still there. Question is if we tune into it.
Oh, so let's explain that. Very good. So you said this has to do with light. Very good what you say. You're saying we see it in physics and light. He's going to say this has to do with the quality of light. Yeah, very good. Mamer in a moment. The Mamer explains it says in Shmuel Aleph, the famous expression in Tanakh, we say it often, Ein Kadosh Kashem. There's no one as holy as Hashem. Kavai. V'isa b'zoyar, on this the Zoyar says, a peladik Zoyar, Kama Kadishin Einon. There is numerous things that are holy, but V'leis Kadosh Kavai. But no one is as holy as Hashem. What's pshat? It's an interesting zayah. Kama kadishin. There are other things that are holy, but ain't kadosh, like you say, there's no kadosh like him. There's other things that are holy. You're not saying there's nothing holy, but ain't kadosh, nothing is as holy as Hashem. What's this comparison? What's the pshat? Ain't Eid Mulvad. See, teaches us. The Kadosh Havaya, it's not a competition between Hashem and Chas v'Shalom, other things, they're also holy. The only Kedusha is from Hashem. The Kadosh Havaya ain't kama Kaddish to Seder Ishtalshalos. This Kedusha, the way it's manifested in the hierarchy of creation called Seder Ishtalshalos. The Kaddish Shebe Seder Ishtalshalos who the Kadosh Muvdal, u Kedushasam hu she'enem ba'im b'slapshos. Aval kashem mislapshim hareim b'bchinas tfisa. Utfisa poyel shinoi. Mashenkin Kadosh Havaya shu b'chinas ha'er. Ein edoyme la Kaddish to Seder Ishtalshalos. There's levels of Kedusha. We talk about Kedusha. The definition of Kedusha is it remains above. It remains sublime. The definition of, like Rashi says, Kedoshim to you, Prushim to you. When you say something is holy, it's aloof. You'll say, a hecher a mensch. There's a higher type of person. It doesn't mix. It doesn't get involved. You don't get enmeshed. You don't get entangled. It's like what the Shvatim with Yosef. They said you can't run a superpower in an intimate way and remain dveikasdik. It doesn't work. You have to be a shepherd. In other words, the definition of kedusha throughout Seder Yishtalshalus is that you're taka above. You're taka muvdal. Even if you're present, you still remain on the peripheral element. You still remain above muvdal. And if you taka are going out of yourself, and if you taka going into that space, you're going to also become b'chinas tfisa, meaning you're going to become defined by it. You're going to be grabbed by it. It's either or. If you want to remain above, gesund to hate. So even when you're present, you're not fully present in the terms of their reality. You're above. I think Rabbi Yitzchak Vorker once said, the great Hasidim Rabbi Yitzchak Vorker, he said the definition of a Jew is he can scream while he's silent. He can dance sitting in one place. And even in the presence of 1,000 people, he's alone. The Yitzchak Vorker. Even in the presence of he's still alone. Reb Shimshon Astropoler once said, Toiva haplishus im habriyos, v'habdidus b'soich b'nei adam. Toiva haplishus im habriyos, v'habdidus b'soich b'nei adam. So you could look at it in two ways, which precious means to be aloof, to be separate, but among people. Don't run to an island. V'habdidus, to be alone, b'soich b'nei adam, amongst people. So you could look at it in two ways. One is, there's the kedusha, the way it's in Seder Yishtalshalus. You have to remain in your own sacred space and not mix, like the oil. And if I am mixing, I'm going to become defined by it. And that's how it is with the nefesh and the guf. On this, the Zohar says that's the such kedusha. That's kedusha also. But ein kadosh kavaya, the kedusha of Shem Havaya, which represents Ein Sof, that's a whole different type of kedusha. That's a kedusha that doesn't ever have to become sublime and aloof, and so to speak, remain above, in order not to be defined. But even in his slapshus, which means l'cha'ira, it's completely embodied and manifested, and inside, v'ata mechayes kula means every pitch of every nuance of every creation is a manifestation of Ein Sof. So it's betachtasai slapshus in your personality, in the presence of the sha'ol. V'atziyah sha'ol hineka. And yet Yoina says, "Mi beten sha'ol shivati," from the belly of the abyss I cried out. Over there he was makar elikus, because it still stays Ein Sof over there. To have an example for this, everything Hashem gave example. Hu kedugmas ha'or lamata shemeir. An example for this is in physics the concept of light, and that's why it's called Or Ein Sof. And here we see a very interesting thing. The way Chassidus explains is everything in the world is a mashal. Everything in the world is a mashal. It's a metaphor. Not just because we like metaphors, because it makes it more powerful. It's much deeper than that. The mashal is the nimshal manifested physically. You understand? It's not a mashal. It's a cute metaphor. Why not? It'll make it easier to understand. No, the mashal is the nimshal. So when we talk about light in the physical world, it's not just light, but it's a good mashal when we talk about spiritual light. No, physical light is spiritual light. The way it's manifested in the physical world. Now, because it's manifested in the physical world, it's going to have physical limitations. It's not going to be the perfect mashal. It's not God, it's light. But because it's the way that Hashem is expressing Or in Geshem, so therefore Or is going to have properties that are closest and that are unique, that you don't have anywhere else in the world. And that's a fascinating concept. In Kabbalah, this is a big yisay. Like water is a manifestation of chesed. Fire is a manifestation of good. It's not just a good mashal. Water reminds you of chesed. No, mayim is the way chesed is embodied in the physical properties. The physical chemistries of water are dimensions of chesed. The physical chemistry of eish can give you an understanding in gvura. Not perfect, not impeccable. It's physical substances. And the same is true with Or. And that's why you see something unbelievable. That Or, light, anyone who knows even the 101 of physics will tell you that Or is something that we still don't understand. It's filled with paradox. It's hafla v'fela. Even though, really, you could say nothing in the universe we fully understand. Anyone who says, the most ignorant thing is to think you understand the universe, right? Until another year comes, another 50 years come, we realize. But within ignorance, there's levels. The Oir is so mysterious, it's so wondrous, it's so saturated with paradox that there's still constantly arguments and debates how to define it. And the truth is, those arguments are not because people are ignorant and foolish. It's because Oir, by definition, is something that's not so easily defined. Why? Because the definition of Oir is that it's not defined. Because it's a mashal, it's a manifestation, kevayachal in Gashmis of Oir Ein Sof. So the whole reason why we have these things in the world is, it's a way of knowing the truth. That's why the fights between science and religion are such a humorous and foolish idea, because it's the exact opposite. It's not like, okay, we'll try hard and we're not going to be afraid of science, we'll try. It's the opposite.
Consilience of truth has to be the same.
Yeah, if truth is truth, so truth, there's an expression from the Rabbi, Rabbi Levi ben Gershon, he was one of the great philosophers. It's a sefer called Melchamas Hashem. It's proofs for God's existence. He lived in the 15th century, 14th century, Rabbi. They called him Gershon site, Yeah, in France, yeah. Rabbi Levi ben Gershon, The
court astrologer.
The court astrologer. He was a very, very interesting man. He has a commentary on Tanakh. So a very interesting commentary. The Rabbi. So he has a sefer Melchamas Hashem. There's a lot of proofs for God's existence. So one place over there has like 100 proofs, interesting proofs from languages and culture. So at the end, after he finishes, like, I don't remember, like a lot of proofs. He has a line, he finishes, he says, V'zem is gulas ha'emes, shemaskim la'atzmai mikol tzad. And this is the sign of truth, that any angle you're going to come from, you're going to discover it. I say, what do you bring 100 proofs? In other words, if it's true, it's going to come out here, it's going to come out there, it's going to come out from Mizrach, Ma'irav, Darim, Tzafin. And a lie, even if here you don't see it, it's going to come out from someone, it's going to come out here, it's going to come out in 10 years, in 20 years, 100 years. At some point, reality prevails, because reality is real. Reality, from the word real, reality prevails.
Someone say that when science was philosophy, and philosophy was science, that the scientists go up the mountain and they find a philosopher sitting there.
Yeah, the old... yeah, like you could say, Bereshis bara l'kim ha'shamayim v'asad. For thousands of years, the argument was that the world have a beginning or not a beginning. The greats like Aristotle and others believed, like the Rambam says, Olam is a kadma, and it was always there. So you don't have to deal with who created it. It was always there. God was always there, was always there. Suddenly, but we learn Bereshis bara l'kim ha'shamayim v'asad. Everything has a beginning. Suddenly in the 1920s, and then it wasn't authentic, but then in the 1960s, they actually start hearing the sounds, the music of what they call a Big Bang, and suddenly today in science, to say that the world doesn't have a beginning, it's like a joke. So everybody came back to Bereshis, but now the argument is, what caused the beginning? Okay, but a beginning there is. And how far it is. A few weeks ago it was 15.3 billion years, today it became 27 billion years. You know that. Inflation. So that's why Oir is such. It's such a, when in Kabbalah and Chassidus the expression is always Oir Ein Sof. So when we speak about light, obviously we're talking about light that we can relate to, light that allows us to see things, and yet it's a mashal, it's a manifestation of the union of Oir. So with all of its limitations, it teaches us about this essential idea, this essential experience we were talking about of Oir Ein Sof, Lamata Ad Ein Tachlis. It comes everywhere. It's not afraid, so to speak. And yet it remains fully infinite. And therefore there's no metzias that a person is ever hopeless, detached, isolated. Lo yidach mimenu nidach. Atzia im esak shamayim shamata, v'atzia sha'oil hineka. And the same way like in shamayim. Even though it's the sha'oil. What do we see in light? So he says, the light will shine, the light will arrive, but it's never going to become defined and, so to speak, mixed in and manipulated and exploited. How much I see of it, that depends where the person is, what their kelim are, what their vessels are. One example would be you have light that shines, very interesting, that gives these mashalim before the physics of light was so developed. They didn't even know that there's something to talk so much about. Like the Greeks thought that the reason we see things is our eyes are like flashlights. Our eyes send out messages. That's what they thought. Our eyes send out messages. This was a very, very big shitta. Our eyes send out message, and the eyes pick up stuff. Because they saw at night, animals, sometimes you could see in their eyes is like a fire in their eyes, a light in their eyes. They didn't even relate to Oir as a Metzias. There's a Metzias called Oir, and it travels. Today we know wavelengths and frequencies and speed. Light is it's a whole universe. It's not a whole universe, it's the whole universe. So he says, we see with Oir, Shemeya derech ha-schuchas. It shines through schuchas. Schuchas would mean glass. V'yesh schuchas aduma. You can have a red window, red glass. You have iruka. You can have green. You can have levana. You can have white. So these are the mashalim he gives in the Mamer. So in brackets, the Rebbe just says, you think Stami threw out a few colors? He threw out a few colors. He could have said other colors. He says, Masha tafas aduma yiruka levana yeshlem neishem begimel hakavin shezal klol l'seder ishtalshlos aduma din kava smoil yiruka kava emtsoil levana kava chesed. Even the colors are meticulous because from the Oir is filled with colors. But there's 3 colors that become the 3 points that begin Seder Ishtalshlos, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes. And in Kabbalah, white and Yarak is yellowish, greenish, and red. So you have, like he says, Aduma, red, is connected to Kava Smoil, Din, Para Aduma, the color of fire. And Yeruka, which is green, yellow, which is Kava Emtsai, is the middle line, Tiferes, and Levana, white, is connected to Chesed. So even the colors that he uses is in order to bring something out, because we want to bring out that from the Ur there's Chesed and there's Gvura and Tiferes, like we learned before. It's called Kalim of Atzilus. Chesed is defined, Gvura is defined, Tiferes is defined. It's all definition. It's all finite, but really, what is it? It's really Ur.
It's interesting. It's almost correct physically. RGB. Almost correct. RGB, right? So red, green, and blue. Like it says red, green, and white.
RGB. So the truth is interesting. He's saying red, green, and blue.
All the colors consist of this red, green.
Right, all colors.
Like color printers, sometimes only have to get these 3 colors. You get
everything. Yeah. And the printers, RGB, red, green, and blue, because it includes everything.
Yeah. White actually includes everything. So
white really means everything. No, white, when something is white, it absorbs everything.
That's why it's white.
So that's why. I think it also very interesting.
You can see it.
Huh?
White is actually all.
It's white, so you don't need a white color.
Yeah. I think also it's often in Kabbalah, the Pardes of Jarmedu Moshe Kadvari has something called Shar Hagvanim, the portal of colors. It's meaning all the colors, Al Pi Kabbalah. So I think also blue is associated with Chesed, Chelis and Tzitzis. Yeah. So it's not a stira. The Yesh Chilukim B'Maidas Elo. No, it's a very fascinating marshal. Nobody's going to say there's no differences between red and green and yellow and blue and white. Of course there's differences. It's a different experience. What we call a different frequency. Aval ha'oid hadeu pashat. But the light is pashat. Pashat here means it's not defined by it. Ubilti yesh b'shum maraklam b'maras hachchuchas. You don't define it by this color or that color. Oh, it's red light. That's the whole metzius of the light. It contains in it the ability to be able to be expressed this way and that way and that way. And prisms bring out, right, like the rainbow, bring out different colors. It's klei schuchas. The prism. You can have, yeah. So schuchas is a prism, whether it filters red or it filters blue or it filters green or it filters yellow or other colors. That's what it does. It's filtering and bringing out this capacity. So now let's go on the Nimshal. Eirein Soif has in it infinity. It also has finiteness, but it's not defined by Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes. Like we gave in the Mashal, the Alter Rebbe's Mashal with the Koyach HaKsivi, right? You can write every single letter, even though it's going to come out in one letter, but don't define my entire power of writing by that letter. Even though from the outsider, all he has is an Aleph. So all I have is the finite universe. But essentially, you're dealing with Ein Sof. So any experience can be traced back to the light. Or I can get defined by the color. The Chiddush of Yosef was, he didn't get defined by the color, even though the color was there. And the color is important. That's what he says. True, the red is also a manifestation of light. The Ur comes through the red also. And what I'm experiencing is red light. All the tables in the room are going to look red. All the bookcases in the room are going to look red. The beams are going to, everything is red. So it's red. Yeah, it's red. I'm going to have the feeling and the sensation and the experience of red. When you're selling a red carpet, right? Really, there should be another sun. It's a lie. It's not a red carpet. Exactly. The reason I'm seeing a red carpet is because all the other colors were absorbed in the carpet. So really you should say the only color that it's not is red, and therefore the guy's a liar. But the truth is, it's a joke. It's true. If we're talking physics, it's not red. But the guy who's buying the rug or the guy who's buying the carpet, he wants it to look red. That's what he wants. He wants an experience of redness when you come into his dining room. So it's red. If you're talking in the world of physics, it's anything but red. Because the Seder is, you know what works about Isaac? When colors, let's say colors coming in through red glass, right? I see red, right? Because all the other colors in the light are absorbed in the glass. The only thing that's reflected, that doesn't go into the glass, is the red. The only thing that's actually, so the glass is not red. But that's all abstract, that's all true. But the experience is red. The Eir's experience is red. And that's the whole idea. The experience of the world is Gvul. The experience of the world is a letter. It's Kalim of Atzilus. It's Kalim. But it doesn't take away the truth that this is my experience of it. But don't define the Eir by that. It's not true. The Eir also has the capacity to be expressed through red. V'gami meir al yadam b'slapshus. This doesn't mean the Eir remains aloof. No, the Eir goes in. What does it mean goes in? Shadil achri shayr over derech haschuchis einer nida Eir pashet ala adam ayarek. Vainu shayr ba beifen sheyesh le erechim haschuchis ubenim shlo winyin slapshus Eir lahavis lachies mikol makem einer Eir nitfus l'vishayna mesanav. Here's a mashal. It's not like the Eir remains pristine because it remains in its own world. No, it has a relationship. It interacts. It's coming through the glass, through the prism, through the window. And it's being, so to speak, affected by it, so to speak. What do we mean affected by it? It's red, it's not yellow. Your light is yellow. Your room is yellow. My room is red. It's a very different experience. So we're not talking the way the Eir is just completely aloof and it has no relationship with the nuances of that which it is shining through. It does. And everything is transformed because of it. It's yellow, it's not red, it's blue, it's not green, and it's white or black. Whatever the color is. It doesn't look like an Eir Pashat. We don't have a relationship with that simple, undefined light. That's called hislapshus. Still, the Eir is not nitfus by it. You don't say, this defines the light. It doesn't define the light. It's the keli of the schuchis captures a certain frequency in the electromagnetic wave, and that frequency my eye can absorb and interpret as red, and it becomes a red experience, and that's true. So spiritually, what is this a mashal for? This is the mashal for Eir Ein Sof. So even as it comes through, I'm having a lot of red in my life, gvuda, or chesed, or teferet, whatever it is in my life, and the light comes through it. Nonetheless, the Eir remains in its pshittus. It remains in the Ein Sof, and therefore the person can always stay connected to that. K'may ken yuven derech dugma b'Eir v'chayis alakia mechaya she'einu mishtana klal v'ein by shum shinu v'yispailas v'kozel l'visha Eir Ein Sof be'etzem al keni nigamis pashtusi b'bchinas Ein Sof, because Eir is Ein Sof essentially. And therefore, wherever it comes, it remains Ein Sof. It never, ever can go out of that. It remains Ein Sof, even in finiteness, even in the red, and even the blue, and the yellow, and the color, in all the rainbows of life, the colors of life. It retains that purity. Now, if we speak in our life, it's not just different colors. It's all different types of experience. Every experience is a color. Every emotion has a color. Some people actually see things in colors, you know. Synesthesia, see people see things. Every emotion has a color. So there's all these types of colors in life. And people have colors, and different days have different colors, different moments have different colors. So that's a very powerful dogma of how the Eir works. So it's not just, there's a place of you that's holy. Einoid mulvade. That's not the vart here. The vart is the red itself is pshittus, and the yellow itself is pshittus. Even as the or comes through yellow, you're not going to define the or completely as the yellow.
Actually, if the object is, for example, yellow, what it means, let's do red. If object is red,
Yeah.
it means that it's the only color that it reflects.
Right.
It absorbs all the other colors.
Yeah.
Completely absorbing.
It absorbed the other colors and it reflected only the red. That's why we see the red. As I told them, the color we're seeing is actually the only color that wasn't absorbed in the object, in the glass. It was reflected by it. It bounced off it. It was thrown away from it. It bounced off it. And that's the secret of Oyer B'chlal, that it, for example, there was a huge machloikus, and it's crazy how it took hundreds and hundreds of years. Isaac Newton believed that light is particles. It's sort of like a particle. Later, 100 years later, with scientific experiments, they realized that it works like a wave because of interference, like waves. Then they realized again that it behaved like a particle. So it drove everybody crazy. And then at some point, they actually had to say, in the words of the Gemara, that people used to make fun of, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. No, mamish. Like, the mistake was that we decided it has to be this or this to be true. Why? Because that's how I think truth works. Either you're a particle or you're a wave. Particle is like a marble, right? You're like a self-contained entity, a photon, and therefore if there's like two slits, two holes, it either goes through one or goes through the other, right? Which made sense. It worked. But then suddenly, when they looked at the target, they saw it was like waves that get mixed with each other, and there's a whole mishmash. So that means it's a wave, it's not a particle. So they decided it's a wave. But then they had proof that it's a particle until they realized it's both. And then they realized the next step. And that is they decided that they're going to watch it pass through and see how it happens. And then they realized that the moment light is being observed, it will become only one model. It collapses into one model and becomes predictable. In other words, the light knows when someone is watching, not only someone, even a machine. If you're observing me, in other words, if you're asking me a question about myself, I'm going to give you the answer you want to hear, which is, I'm this or this. As long as you let the light be and get out of its way, it will behave freely. Yes. So suddenly the observer of the physical world changes the properties of the physical world. There's a relationship. It almost it sees me. It sees a child looking, the child is looking fine, I'll behave. You're not a keli for Ein Sof. You're not a keli for paradoxes. I'll give you what you want. Don't worry, I'm a very predictable guy. The ramifications of that in terms of physics and then in terms of ruchnius are mind-boggling. The relationship of a person to the universe. Another fascinating thing about light is the speed of light. The speed of light also boggles the imagination. You're dealing with 186,000 miles per second. The speed of light. In the physical world, you're getting close. This is the language of Ein Sof. It's not infinite because it's physical. Nothing physical is infinite. But so to speak, as close as we can get to a mashal of Ein Sof, 186,000 miles per second. You know, the light of the sun arrives here 8 minutes late. Right, what we're seeing is not right now. It's 8 minutes ago because it takes time to travel. But how long? 8 minutes. 186,000 miles per second. The paradox, if it's a particle or a wave, again, shows how it's not defined. Another fascinating thing is you can't see light. We don't see light. What do we see? We see the objects that are illuminated by the light.
Small spectrum.
Yeah. And in that itself, we could see a small spectrum. So the Oid itself remains something that is transcendent, even as we see its impact, and its impact is so crucial, and its impact can also be paradoxical. It makes things grow. There's photosynthesis and growth and heat and electricity and intensity and drying. From all different angles, the same Nekuda of Oir has so many different and paradoxical functions.
Actually, you can see the past.
You could see the past. You see through Oir. Right. So excellent question. You're saying when I close the shade, the light doesn't yeah, right. But that's because ultimately you're talking about the limited light of the sun. When you're talking Oid Ein Sof, there's nothing that can cut it off. It's Ein Sof Be'etzem. Ein Sof Be'etzem means it's essentially Ein Sof. In other words, it's not Ein Sof because Hashem just wants it to extend further and further and further. But Be'etzem, it's something of Ein Sof. So wherever it is, it's fully Ein Sof. Yeah. So even in the Sha'oil, it's fully Ein Sof. And that's why Gam Choshech Lo Yachshech Mimeka V'Layla Kayom Yair. Even darkness can't eclipse it. I saw a line somebody wrote. So there's a scientist, he made an experiment. He wants to show people how you can't see light. So he has this box, and there's tremendous intensity of light that shines into the box. And because it's all light, so therefore you can't see. So he wants to show how light itself you can't see. So he writes, he says, what is the nature of this invisible thing called light, whose presence calls everything into view except itself? Its presence calls everything into view. Without light, there's nothing that I can see. Nothing. There's nothing. So this light allows us to see and perceive everything in reality. Besides itself. That not. So it allows you to see everything. And that's really the idea of Oir in terms of its bittul. Oir is the most egoless thing in the universe. Why? It's the only thing, it never points to itself. Right? I come into a room, look at me. That's our nature. Look at me, notice me. Oir says, notice everybody else besides me.
You can actually notice it and send it.
Of course. And then you notice that it's really everything. Because it's bittul, it becomes everything. First, it allows you to see everything. Why does it allow you to see everything? Because it's not defined by yesh. That's the chiddush of Oir. Because it's bittul to the Ein Sof, its whole metzius is I'm expressing the source. And that's what Oir is. I'm expressing the source. He explains a little more. He says, Azai, Va'inyan Bezeh. Va'inyan Bezeh, Kefir Shemavayir, Ad Mamer Shab Nishma Seiden Barucha. The Rebbe Rashab explains in a Maimon known as Hamshich Tafir Samach Vav, Ein Oimdin, he says, Achiluk Shbin Oir LeKayach. We have two terms called Oir and Kayach. The Hine, Kayach means power, Oir means light. Both are communications. You communicate your kayach, you communicate your oir, but there's a big difference. Kayach becomes a metzius. Oir never becomes a metzius. It remains completely bottled to its source, and therefore it never points to itself, but it allows you to see everything else, including yourself. Dehine game in Yenachi Elyon Sheba Adam in Yenaseichel Shureishis Agilim Yetzem HaNefesh Eine Beifen Shel Oir Pashat Elo Beifen Shel Kayach Shenyanayu Sheshayach B'Shinu V'Yispailos. Even one of the highest manifestations of the soul, which is Seichel. Seichel, we're not here talking about a specific idea. It's the ability of the soul to experience Seichel, to experience ideas. That's not called Oir Pashat, it's called Kayach. And therefore it goes through change, it's affected. A kayach is the way something comes into something, but it's islapshus, and therefore it gets affected. It gets defined by it. And by Hashem, you also have that concept. You have Oir Ein Sof, and then you have kayach. Kayach is the way something comes in as a defined entity, and therefore it's defined by that recipient which it has a relationship with. Like energy, yeah. Energy. Kayach, power is energy, yeah. Versus Oir, light. That's the distinction. It's a very subtle distinction because sometimes you'll mix up the two. You know, Oir is a form of energy, and energy is a form of expression, obviously. But in a very subtle way, there's a difference. That's why in Seichel itself, there's different levels. For example, Yesh Seichel Pnimi, Yesh Seichel Chitzayni, Seichel Amok, Seichel Shitchi. Interesting. Seichel itself, there'll be what's called a Seichel Pnimi, an inner idea and an outer idea, a superficial idea. There'll be a Seichel Amok, a deep idea, and Seichel Shitchi means a superficial idea. Ideas themselves come packaged on different levels, different ways. That's not like Oir. V'inyan zeh, lo rak mitzad hashinu bebiru v'zichur klei hamayach shel adam hamaskal. Shemisha klei moichem avoradim u'mizachachim yoyse yachal lekabel seichel amok. V'im lav yachal lekabel rak seichel chitzayni seichel shitchi. You could say, no, Seichel is one. It's like oir. It's all based on your own brain. In other words, somebody whose brain is more refined, is more developed. So then you could receive a deeper idea. Someone not can only receive a superficial idea. You could say, in other words, it's all about the recipient. So then it would be just like light. It's all about the recipient, how much kalim you have. Why are you saying the seichel itself comes in different ways? He says that's not the case. If it's only mitzat, the refinement of my own intellectual, cognitive power, there won't be a mitzvah that a person first grasps what's called seichel pnimi, an inner idea, and only afterwards an external idea. He'll explain. If it's all about the keli, so then the seder of a keli is, the seder when you refine a keli, so when you work with a keli, you open yourself up to more light. You open yourself up to a deeper level, to a deeper truth. It won't happen the other way, that first you're going to get the deeper, and then you'll get the more superficial, if it's mitzad keli. Ve'ein loymar, shasibah lekach shemasik tchila seichel pnimi v'achach seichel chitzoni levishaata koi b'hai mesechta sheila shayach seichel pnimi ve'ein oisik b'mesechta achrita sheila shayach seichel chitzoni shareinu roim lepam shegam ba'oise inyan sichli yasik tchila sapratim apnimim shebeseichel v'ach achakach yasik sapratim achitzonim shebeseichel zaguf. You can't say that now you're learning one mesechta, one sugya, and that's the seichel pnimi that you're typhus. The seichel chitzoni is from a different sugya, it's a different mesechta. He says you see sometimes the same idea, the same inyan, you're first going to grasp the pnimius of it before even you grasp the chitzonius of it, which means it's a very abstract mashal. You have to know how seichel works there. At least one aspect of it, the way I understand it. Sometimes you're learning something, right? In every seichel, there's seichel chitzoni. Seichel chitzoni means like the most superficial elements, maybe some of the technical stuff. Seichel pnimi is the richness of it, the deeper hafshata of it, more abstract. If it was all based on the person's mayach being open, your first type is the chitzonis and your type is pnimis. You see, sometimes it doesn't work that way. Sometimes you'll right away get the pnimius of it, the deeper part of it. And maybe it'll take you days, weeks, till you finally figure out the chitzonius of it. Like it comes in a completely different way. First the pnimius comes out, then the chitzonius comes out. ואם כן בהכרח לומר שהשינוי בקבלת השכל אינו רק מצד בירור וזיכוך כלי המוח, אלא שיש גם שינויים בשכל עצמו, שלכן נקרא כוח השכל ולא אור השכל. מה שאין כבניין האור, הנה אף שיש שינוי בין אור השמש, אור הלבן, אור הנר, האבוקה, אין זה כמו השינוי בשכל פנימי ושכל חיצוני, כיוון שהשינוי אינו בהאור גופה. כי מפני שהאור זה שייך למאור הגדול זה השמש, והאור זה שייך למאור הקטן זו הלבנה, והאור זה שייך לנר ולאבוקה, ובגלל זה חלוקה מהם ומשתנים זה מזה, אבל אין זה שינוי בהאור גופה. You want to give a share on this? Huh? Did you get the seichel pnimi before the seichel chitzoni? It's an interesting mashal.
So it's basically like in a way like a chokhmah. It grasps you before you understand what it is.
Yeah, it grasps you before you understand it. The epiphany, yeah. You sometimes typhus the seichel pnimi before you typhus the seichel chitzoni. It doesn't work in the order, Let's begin with this. Usually like in a curriculum in school, right? There's grade 1, and then you build in grade 2, and grade 3, grade 4, and it's all built on different levels until you come to high school, and then later even more abstract levels. So it's like almost the keli is developing, and it gets ready for more abstract things. That's how you would think Bapashtas would be. He says, but you see, and the Etaka works that way very often, but you see often a completely different way. And that is, the person first experiences the pnimius, like you got it. You got the nekuda. You can't talk about it. You have 100 questions. Technically, I don't know, maybe contradictions. You still have to work with the chitzanis, but the pnimius you got.
So basically, you gets the idea, but not the properties and attributes of ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. The core of the idea he got, but a lot of the properties and the attributes which you're going to need to write it down or to communicate it or to make a full picture. And more, sometimes the more superficial parts he didn't even get. And it's not pshat you say, yeah, he's fooling himself. No, taka the seichel pnimi, he taka received. So he says, seichel lechatchila comes in a oifen. Seichel is a gilui. It's also a gilui of the nefesh. It's the soul's ability to be able to grasp, to be able to understand. It also shines a light. Seichel is a form of light. But he says still it's called koyach ha-seichel, not oir ha-seichel. It's also a form of light. It's a different type of light. Like we call, there's a light bulb goes off in your head, right? It's also a light. The soul shines a light. It's called chachma, it's called bina, it's called das. Oir ha-chachma, oir ha-bina, oir ha-das. It's sometimes called light. Why? Because essentially it shines a light that allows you to see the frequencies of intellect. The frequency, we take these things for granted, but we shouldn't. Everything is another miracle. Everything is another chiddush. But he says it still doesn't operate like oir. Oir is unique in the sense that einay mishtana, einay misaref. The shinui in the oir itself, there's no shinui. The oir itself never ever changes.
One frequency doesn't become another frequency.
Yeah. Of course, he says you can't compare the light coming from the sun, the light coming from the moon, the light coming from a candle, the light coming from a torch. The source is a different source. So the light, obviously, is manifesting that source. But the light itself doesn't go through change. Says להמשיך שם שמה שלמטה אינה אור השמש מאיר כל כך כמו למעלה, הרי זה לפי שהשמש הוא גם כן נברא בעל גבול. That's what he's asked. You see that the light of the sun in different places is less. It doesn't shine here like it is there. It's because ultimately it's also limited. It's also a finite being. You're talking about a finite being. And as he says in a footnote, and sometimes you also have the atmosphere and the climate and the murkiness and the achruris and the aver, the atmosphere could be, could have things that block. But here we're talking about not the mashal of oir, but oir that's ein soif be'etzem. So therefore, even when it comes down into the lowest place, it's ein tachlis. It's lamata ad ein tachlis. It doesn't get mixed, doesn't get manipulated, doesn't get affected, and doesn't get changed, doesn't get transformed. Remains k'moshehu, the whole oir ein soif be'etzem.
Cannot be filtered by anything. Not by clouds, not by...
Nothing filters it. Clouds don't filter it, and Venetian blinds don't filter it, and curtains don't filter it, and a rainy weather doesn't filter it. The Oir HaShemesh, it's a gvul. So therefore, ultimately, it's true, the properties of Oir is that it doesn't change, but ultimately you can't say nothing affects it, nothing gets to it. Right? It's physical, and every physical has competition. You're a gvul and I'm a gvul. And there's also, and even if the Oir itself, taka, doesn't change, but then there's different realities that don't allow me to see it. Mashenkin the Oir ein soif, it's Oir ein soif be'etzem. So therefore, nothing can ever filter it. So it could be in the sha'oil because it remains pashut wherever it is. So there's no mitzias, there's no experience. You'll say, I'm such a mess, I'm so ruined, I'm so meshigah. I went through all these experiences, I blocked all the light. That's what people think. I blocked it, or I did such crazy things, or I had a crazy youth, or I had a this, I had a that, and this. It's all nice. Not nice. It may be very, very serious and painful and ugly stories. But there's nothing that can even begin to block or filter or eclipse or minimize or compromise or dilute the light. Why? Because it's pashut be'etzem. It's ein soif be'etzem. And because it's ein soif be'etzem, so it's pashut, so there's no nekuda that it ever went up, could be chased away from, could be expelled from. So even in those very spaces of sha'oil, the lowest places, the oil is fully there and was always there. That's why you'll see also, emotionally, and this is hafla of a fella, and that is that a person sometimes, through different avodah that a person does, and different means that Hashem put into the world to help people in healing, is a person could realize later in life that as they went through crazy experiences, the Oir ein soif in them was present, fully there, and not damaged even a fraction of a percent. Not because it wasn't there, it was there. How do I know it was there? It saw, it heard, everything. It wasn't damaged even a drop. Why not? Because it's not shaykh to affect it. Not only that, it's deeper than that. The Oir ein soif can experience the same reality, but from a perspective of ein soif. And that's why this is the future of all healing. Healing is not just there's a part of me that remained untouched. That's big. That's not small, but it's much deeper than that. That part redefines the experience as part of Ein Sof. Vatzia sha'oil hi neka. The sha'oil is also you. In other words, the way Ein Sof, when you say Ein Sof present, doesn't mean it's in the room. It is the room. So the way, it's not just in here. Vata mechayes kula means it is that experience also. So when you can align that experience with Ein Sof, it redefines it as part of your relationship with infinity. And then the darkness itself is a form of light. But that's a very, very profound transformative process. It's not just that there's a part of me that was not damaged, but that part of me redefines the part that was damaged, and the damage itself completely different. It experiences differently. This is only when I can align my entire self with the Oir. And Oir is always bittul. What's bittul? Bittul is I let go of the ego experience of it, and then I allow the Oir experience to come in, and then it allows you to see everything, but see everything in a way that it's a real reflection of its source.
So basically, when you lose your identity, meaning you don't reflect anything except the Ein Sof, that's the only time you can actually reconnect.
Yeah.
So, Beetle is...
Yeah. If the Oir starts saying, I need attention, I want people to notice me, I need a Nobel Prize, or at least a little validation, you're not going to see anything. It's just dark matter. Another piece of dark matter. What allows the Oir to show everything, to reveal everything, and in this case, to reveal this everything, mamash, is it gets out of the way. Because it gets out of the way, you don't even see it. Not because it's not there. It's more there than anything else. When you say it, when you say you don't see it, it doesn't mean it's not there. It's like a shmata, it's a nebach case. You step on me, kill it. No, it's there more than anything else. It's there in such a powerful way that you don't see it. It's not there less. Everything else is only, I could see only because of it. Okay, now we come to the last piece. Test, let's finish. The end of the Pedic of Basi LGani Pedic Yidalad is Vizel Lamata Mata Adin Tachlis. Should be sparsh to Subagili Ad Gamba Madregas Ayos Shvelim Betachlis. That the Ur comes down till the lowest places. And I keep on saying, when they say it comes down, it doesn't mean physically it goes down inside of it. It becomes that. Right? When you say Lamata Adin Tachlis, it doesn't mean it's there. It means it becomes that too. In the klippa, it's distorted. The klippa doesn't say what it is. But mitzad the Oir, the Ein Sof is present even in that space when you could see the truth. So that's why it's not hopeless. So that's the inyan of Oir Lamata Adin Tachlis. Beprokim shalachar is a messiah biyurin yenorin sof lamayla adin ketz shagam shamhu boifen kaza shabachal makom shenimtza rei boifen dein ketz. And then later he continues to the next theme, which is lamayla adin ketz. This is, it goes down all the way. And then it goes up all the way, which over there also, it means that wherever it is, it's in a way of Lamayla Adin Ketz, which he's going to explain Be'ezer Hashem in the next Basi LGanis. And that's the idea of the Koyach HaHelam of Ein Sof, the ability of Lamayla Adin Ketz to be up to no end, which is the antithetical to the of Helam, we'll say.
Distinction really between Kates and Lamata?
Why he says Kates and Tachlis, it's a good quote. Right. Yeah, so that's the truth. But the reason we don't just say Oir Ein Sof is because we want to bring out not just that the Oir is Ein Sof, but that it permeates the Lamata Adin Tachlis. And like I said, it's not just Ein Oid Malvada, it's V'ata Mechayas Kulam, that it relates to the existence itself. The words Kates and Tachlis. I don't know. End, to no end, yeah. Tichl, says until Mechol Tichla or Isi Kates, yeah.
So why he uses that so that we understand that there's an up?
Yeah, exactly. In other words, in our world where there's up and down, we use that language. Now remember, he started, the whole idea was that the time of war, the king gives an oitzer, he gives the treasures that were concealed. We learned in the beginning of the Mamer. The oitzer is what the king gives to the soldiers to win the war. And even those treasures that the king himself would never ever use, nobody even sees them. It's things he received from his ancestors. It's like the crown jewels of the royal, of the monarchy, but this he was going to splurge, not to waste it, in order for the Netzach and HaMelchama. Because Netzach, to defeat the evil, is deeper in the soul than everything else. So he explained at the beginning of the Mamer, the Basi LGani achaisi kala, to transform Sitra Achera, to transform the darkness of the world, the shtus, the insanity of Klippa, into holy insanity. The Melech gives the deepest oitzeres to the soldiers, dafka the foot soldiers, to win the war. And he said that in order to understand what the oitzer is concealed. So first you have to understand what the oit is. So first he started to explain oit in saif lamata adin tachlis. He's going to explain lamayla adin ketz. And then there's the treasure. Amram beis in yana melu lamayla adin ketz lamata adin tachlis nikraim b'shem oir shenyane gilui. These two things we're talking about oir. Oir means light. Light is communication. That's what light is. The source of all communication is light. It's embodied by light. Oir is gilui, the communication of one thing to another thing, what we call seeing it, that's called oir. Even though you're talking about oir, which even as it comes down, it doesn't get mixed. It doesn't get affected. It doesn't get changed. Still, when you talk about oir, you can get lost in the light and not remember the treasure, which is beyond gilui, which is beyond revelation. I'll say in a moment a little more about it. This treasure, which is even deeper than the oir, because every Jew is in the Tzivis Hashem, the army of Hashem. It's given to the Jew by the king in order to be successful, to go out to the battle in the world. The Gemara says in Shabbos, Kel Zar, the alien god inside of you, that's the Yetzer Hara. So that's where the war begins. There's the war in the outside world, but the first Netzach is the inner world. Ba'ofen the Netzach ze binyan Yerushalayim kedusha b'Gemara says we say L'cha Hashem Agdula v'Tiferes v'Netzach v'Haitz. It says Netzach is binyan Yerushalayim. Hainu livnis as Yerushalayim sheba Yerushalayim. It takes victory to build your own Yerushalayim. What's Yerushalayim? So the Medrash Rabbi says, Taisvus brings it in Tainus, Yerushalayim is two words, Yira Shalom. Whole Yira, complete Yira. To build your own Yerushalayim, which means to win my Yetzer Hara, that takes Netzach. That's the Midas HaNetzach. And for this Netzach, in the person's own world and in the outer world, you give in the Oitzer. This is achieved through the avoid of Mesidus Nefesh. What does Mesidus Nefesh mean? It's not something that I need to understand with my brain and grasp with my brain. Even Seichel in its highest levels, Koyach HaSeichel in the highest level of Seichel, has its limits. It's a Koyach. But then there is finding the Oitzer of Yerushalayim. The Gemara speaks about every Jew has an Oitzer, a treasure of Yerushalayim. It's called an Oitzer. What does it mean it's an Oitzer? As he says, the king has it hidden that nobody can see it. Nobody touches it. Nobody manipulates it. Nobody squanders it. And the same is true with me. I could use all the resources in my life. The Oitzer of Yerushalayim remains unscathed. Nobody can get close to it and access it and cause it to be spent and say it was wasted. There's no such a thing. Because of Jew is a chelik alekamim al mamash. It's called Yechida. Yechida means the core of the soul, which is one, and it receives from Yachid. Yechida Shalaylam. In that space, there is complete oneness. You're completely aligned with the Achdus in the entire world. There comes a time in life where you have to take this Oitzer and splurge it, use it, b'mesidus nefesh, and then you can be victorious. And that causes yet a further flow of the treasures given him. Kol ha'in yakar, all of the most precious things, even beyond Eir, Ein Sof. So in other words, this avoid of a Jew going into a world that's filled with sheker and filled with shtus, and having the courage to face that adversity head on and transform it with this Mesiras Nefesh. So in order to do it, you're given the oitzer that's beyond revelation. And through it, you're given even more. This is where the person receives kol hain yakar, even that which is higher than Oirein Sof Lamad Nekasmad Tachlis, because it touches Kavayachal, the Atzmos, the essence of everything. Like we said, that Netzach, victory, touches Etzem HaNefesh. The need of the Melech, that goodness should win over evil, that touches Etzem. You see the Mesiras Nefesh that comes out by soldiers, by people facing the worst and worst of evil. It's completely a Ma'alim and a Seichel. It's like a certain frequency they tune into, a certain level of self, a chord, Yechidish Benefesh. That is, I saw somebody was speaking, a commander, his name is Oded Harush, I think. So he was saying, I want all the Jewish people to come with us for a few days into Khan Yunis in Gaza. He says, you'll see a different nation there. He says they had to go into a house. So he told somebody under him, the soldier, I'll go in first. So he says, no, you don't know what Hamas put there. They could put booby traps. You have 4 children. I'll go in first. So he says, but you have 2 children. He says, but you have 4. He says, yeah, but I'm older. I built my family already. You're still young. I'm going to go in first. He says, no, I want to go in first. He says, I also have more experience in Gaza. I was here before. I know the area better. So he's describing to this reporter, he's saying, all the Jewish people should come into Khan Yunis and see the debate that soldiers are having with each other. If you talk about it al pi seichel, it wasn't his son, it was another person, another soldier was fighting. So it doesn't make sense. Well, the answer is, yeah, if you're going to try to define it by sense, you're right. It's a different quality that comes out. It's called Yechidish Benefesh. It's mamash l'maylam and aseichel. It's where the Ein Sof mamash dwells, and all of life is experienced differently. What a neshama is, what guf is, what life is, what death is. It's stronger than what we call death. Even death, it doesn't scare them. You're in touch with Ein Sof, just like God is not scared of death. Yechidish Benefesh is not scared of death. Of course, generally you have to live in a way where you're responsible for neshmatim l'nafsheseichem, b'koach nefesh, obviously. But the nekud is that there's such moments that you could see the oitzer, the oirein seif, and even deeper, he says, the oitzer itself, and it gives a person different kach. So that's a very physical manifestation of it. But he's in the general avodah of a Jew in the world, when you get in touch with that space, it's a whole different inyan. And you're given the oitzers for that, and then through that you get even more oitzers. He says, "V'zeh gam kol seeing this about Medrash." This is what it says in Medrash and Eicha. The pasuk Chelki Hashem Mamer. Medrash says a fascinating mashal. Mashal l'malach shenichnas l'medina. A king came into the country. V'hayu imay duksin v'ifrichin, and he had dukes and ifrichin are like commanders and army, military men. The Medrash gives a mashal of all the different levels joining the entourage of the monarch, of the king, who joined him. So there was a debate between the people in the city. Chad Amar, one said, Anon Nasev Duksa. I'm going to go hang out with the duke. Why? Because if I have a good relationship with him, it's called protectia. You know, Chad Amar, Anon Nasev Ifrichin Legabe. I'm going to have a relationship with the Ifrichin. Ifrichin is like one of the military commanders. Hayasham Pikeyachecha. There was one wise man. V'Amar, Anon Nasev Malk. I'm going to the king. I'm gonna get married. I'm gonna create a relationship with the king. What's the machlokes here? All of them, they wanted to have a connection, but this one went for the duksin. This one went for the ifrichin. There was one pikei echechad. He said, no, ananas of malk. Don't get distracted by anything. This is what we find in the avodah of the Alter Rebbe. Sha'amad Alter Rebbe used to say, Mi li b'shamayim v'imchalei chafatzti ba'aretz. Who do I have in heaven, and with you I desire nothing on earth. So he would say in Yiddish, Zeh, ich will nicht dein Gan Eden tachten, ich will nicht dein Gan Eden eljen, ich will mehr nicht as dich allein. K'moshe Kosev at Tzemach Tzedek v'nisparsim gam betfuz. The Tzemach Tzedek writes that his Zayd, the Alter Rebbe during his Dveikus would say, look, I don't want your Gan Eden tachten, I don't want your Gan Eden eljen, I don't want anything, I want only you. That's the pchin of Anon Nasev Malka. That's the oitzer, that's the treasure. Even revelations, all revelations, he doesn't need Gili. I want you, and I can have you. That's the Oitzer. That's the quintessential Oitzer, even beyond Gili, even beyond revelation. And this is something relatable, demanded from each person, that he should crave, he should want Malka the king, not to get distracted by anything else, to remain loyal to the Yichidish B'nefesh. Hainu sheyirtze ha'atzmus bilvad, shalamayla gam me'abchina doirin sof shalamayla adin ketz lamata adin tachlas. The atzmus itself, the core of everything, which is the source of light. Light comes from a source. So it's even higher than Oirein Serve, the way you describe it, Lamaila, then Ketz Lamata, then Tachlos. You could get stuck even in light. Light. The source of the Oir itself. In other words, even when I'm in a place of light, we're always in a place of light, don't get distracted even by the light. Stay connected to the source of the light. This Jew affects in his avodah. He doesn't get affected from the lie of the world. Not to get affected by the lies of the world. And the lies of the world doesn't only mean the lies of the United Nations, or the lies of the New York Times, or the lies of CNN. That's also the lies of the world. Those are big lies. We're talking about here also the inner lie, the lie of the world inside of me, the lies, all those lies that it says right now at this moment. It's very hard because it's a very glamorous and glittering and overwhelming lie, not to get nispal from it. Adarab, through shtus de kedusha, you transform it to sheker, becomes a keresh, becomes a beam. In the Mishkan, this creates the Veshachanti, which he began the Mamer, that we create a dir, a home. We become, and the world becomes a home for Hashem in this world. She'inyan adira, what's the definition of a home? When you say Hashem wants a dira, shebon nimtza atzmus hamelech kamay shehu, v'nimtza sham begilai. The definition of a home is that you're there in your full essence. You go to work, you go somewhere else, you dress up, you're there in a certain capacity. But in the home, it's you. What's the definition of a home? Me, you, atzmus. Not oir. In the house, you're not performing. You don't have to dress a certain way. That's not the definition of home. If you have to be like that in the home, acham vei. A home is, I am I. That's what a home is. That's the beauty of a home. People who don't have such a home, it's very painful. The definition of a home is atzmus. That's why people need a home, right? Why? A home is not just a physical place. It's a dormitory. You have a bed there. That's not the definition of a home is your atzmus is there. But how is it there? V'nimtza sham begili, in a revealed way. So these two things, what's pradira b'tachtoinim? That atzmus is there, but begilui, in a revealed way, not in a dark way. In other words, in a way of oir. So here the two come together. The oir captures the atzmus, and the atzmus is in the oir. Because if the atzmus is everything, it's also in the oir. This is accomplished through a Jew, creating v'shachanti b'soicham, I will dwell among them. And who's the them? Them is in each and every individual.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.